Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this really comforting expectation of just absolute precision.
Right, yeah, like engineering.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you break your arm, you go into the clinic, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line right across the bone. And the
Mhm.
doctor just, points a pen at the light box and says, there it is, that's the problem.
It's totally binary. I mean, it's
Mm.
either broken or it's not broken. The data is just entirely visible to the naked eye.
It's clean. But then you step out of the clinic and into the world of actual human interaction. You step into a boardroom or a car dealership or, like, even just your own kitchen to have a difficult conversation with your spouse.
Yeah, you step into the world of negotiation.
Right. And suddenly, that x-ray machine is just completely useless. I mean, the behavioral landscape we operate in every single day is, frankly, a black box.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters. Because, unlike a fractured bone, you just can't put a human mind on an illuminated screen and point to the exact fracture in someone's logic.
Yeah, you can't see it.
You can't see the hidden fear or the unarticulated desire, or even just the completely irrational bias that's secretly driving their demands.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that invisible landscape is exactly what we are navigating today. We are unpacking a truly fascinating set of notes and excerpts from a text called Bend Their Reality.
A really incredible source text, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And the mission for this deep dive is to isolate and understand those subterranean psychological drivers of negotiation. The goal is to equip you, the listener, with the actual tools to navigate high-stakes conversations.
Whether you're, buying a house, negotiating a starting salary, or just trying to get a fair shake.
Right, without falling into the invisible, irrational traps that trip up the vast majority of people. And to really grasp how counterintuitive this all is, I want to pull you right into a very specific, incredibly intense environment.
A pressure cooker, if you will.
Exactly. So the year is 2004. We are in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It is the chaotic, lawless wake of a rebellion. The kidnapping rate in the city has absolutely skyrocketed.
We're talking, what, 8 to 10 people being pulled off the streets every single day?
Yeah, every single day. And the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator is handling this particularly tense case. A prominent Haitian politician's aunt has been snatched from her car in broad daylight.
Wow.
And the kidnappers make contact, right? The ransom demand is set. $150,000. And the terms from the kidnappers are crystal clear. They say, give us the money or your aunt is going to die.
I mean, the stakes literally do not get any higher. You're dealing with human life as a commodity.
So if you're sitting at that table looking at that demand, the rational mind just screams, give them the money.
Of course it does.
Right. When brutal criminals are holding a weapon to a family member's head, don't you just pay whatever they want? How can there possibly be any leverage in a situation where the other side holds the ultimate trump card of life and death? I mean, traditional logical math just breaks down there.
It does break down. And it breaks down because traditional logic assumes a linear equation. Like when you're staring down the barrel of a literal or metaphorical gun, the brain's amygdala, the fear center, just gets completely hijacked.
Panic floods the system.
Exactly. Your instinct is to concede instantly just to relieve the pressure. But what the source text reveals, and this is the foundational premise we really have to build on today, is that negotiation is never a linear formula.
It's never just X plus Y equals Z.
Right. It's never a simple equation where demand X plus payment Y equals resolution Z. The reality of human interaction is that we all have massive, irrational blind spots. We all have these hidden, completely undeveloped notions about what we actually want.
So finding leverage, even with a violent kidnapper, is about uncovering those unspoken needs.
Yes, uncovering the unspoken needs that lie beneath the surface demand.
It requires you to look past the literal number they are screaming at you. And the text introduces an old Chinese expression that I think just captures this dynamic perfectly. It goes, sleeping in the same bed and dreaming different dreams.
I love that metaphor. It is incredibly profound. Sleeping in the same bed and dreaming different dreams.
It really is.
Because it perfectly describes the physical and logistical intimacy of a partnership, whether that's a marriage, a long-term business merger, or even, the intense, terrifying temporary partnership of a hostage negotiation.
You're occupying the exact same space.
Right, you're bound by the exact same situation, but you lack the actual, genuine communication necessary to sustain it.
You're sharing the mattress, but your internal worlds are light years apart. You have two parties in the same room, ostensibly having the same conversation, but each person is harboring their own entirely separate set of objectives, anxieties, and motivations.
And what's fascinating here is how acknowledging those separate dreams completely dismantles our standard, everyday approach to conversations. We rely so heavily on conversational nicety.
We really do.
We rely on those socially lubricating yeses. You know exactly what I mean. You're explaining something to someone and they just keep nodding their head and say, yes, yes, absolutely, you're right.
Oh, the polite yes, which usually translates to, I want you to stop talking so I can leave.
Precisely. Or it means, I am feeling defensive and agreeing with you is the fastest way to get you to lower your voice.
Yeah, that's so true.
The text emphasizes that those fast, furious, agreeable yeses thrown out early in any interaction are not in any way a substitute for real understanding. A socially lubricating yes is often just a counterfeit.
It's a defense mechanism.
Right. True behavioral change, the kind of fundamental psychological shift you need to lower ransom demand by 90% or get a massive raise, only happens when a counterpart feels unconditionally understood.
Unconditional positive regard. It's like the psychological key that unlocks the door to their dream. And this is where the text makes a critical technical distinction. Getting a counterpart to say yes is fine. But what you're really searching for, the absolute holy grail of any negotiation, is not the word yes, it's the phrase that's right.
That's right. It sounds so simple, right? But the cognitive difference between yes and that's right is an ocean. Well, when someone says, that's right, to you, they aren't just agreeing to a contractual term to get you off their back. They are actively confirming that you have accurately identified, re-articulated, and emotionally affirmed the world exactly as they see it.
You've stepped out of your dream and into theirs.
Exactly. And the exact moment you convince someone that you truly understand their world, their defenses drop, and the foundation for a massive breakthrough is laid.
So if our foundation is seeking, that's right, and uncovering these hidden irrational dreams, we immediately run headfirst into a massive roadblock in how most of us are trained to operate. Let's teleport back to that $150,000 ransom demand in Haiti.
Okay, let's look at the math.
If you pick up almost any traditional 20th century business school textbook, the advice for resolving a conflict is almost always to seek the win-win.
Ah, yes. The infamous, celebrated win-win solution.
Yeah.
The absolute cornerstone of corporate synergy.
We are totally conditioned to revere it. Society drills this into us from kindergarten on the playground. Be reasonable. Accommodate your peers. Find the middle ground.
Right.
So applying that traditional logic to the kidnapping scenario, the math is simple, right? The kidnappers want $150,000. The family wants to pay $0, so let's just split the difference.
Just meet halfway.
We'll offer them $75,000. It's a win-win. We meet halfway and everyone walks away relatively happy.
Which, when you say it out loud in the context of armed criminals holding a hostage, exposes how utterly absurd the concept can be.
It sounds insane.
It does. And yet, that is the exact same underlying logic that highly educated professionals apply to multi-million-dollar corporate acquisitions every single day.
The source text has a really radical thesis regarding this. It completely rejects the pedestal we put compromise on. It states unequivocally that the win-win mindset is usually ineffective, and more often than not, it is completely disastrous.
The core operating rule here is, no deal is better than a bad deal. And compromise, meeting halfway, is very often a terrible deal for everyone involved.
Oh, wait, I have to step in and push back on this a little bit, just on behalf of basic human decency.
Yeah.
I mean, society operates on the idea that compromise is a sacred moral good. It's the bedrock of democracy, right?
Sure, that's the narrative.
If two reasonable people want fundamentally different things, isn't meeting exactly in the middle the only logical, objective, fair step to take? Like, if I passionately want to go to a high-end Italian restaurant for dinner and you adamantly want to go to a vibrant Mexican place, we compromise and go to a fusion place that serves both, right?
And you inevitably end up eating a terrible, confused pizza and incredibly soggy tacos.
Which satisfies absolutely nobody.
Exactly.
And the text provides a brilliant visual analogy for this exact failure of compromise, the analogy of the mismatched shoes. So let's say a husband and wife are getting ready for a formal event. The wife strongly feels that the husband should wear his black shoes with his suit. It's the appropriate look. But the husband adamantly prefers his brown shoes. They have a conflict of interest. So instead of exploring why they each feel that way, they apply the sacred, unimpeachable logic of the win-win compromise. They meet exactly halfway.
The mathematical middle.
And what's the result? The husband walks out the door wearing one black shoe on his left foot and one brown shoe on his right foot.
It is literally the worst possible outcome. It's a solution that creates an entirely new, significantly worse problem.
That's the brilliance of the analogy.
Yeah.
Wearing both black shoes would be a functional outcome. Wearing both brown shoes, while maybe a slight fashion faux pas, would still be a functional outcome.
Right, at least he'd match.
The compromise, the mathematical halfway point, makes him look utterly ridiculous. It fulfills neither person's actual desire. The text argues that the next time you're sitting at a table and you feel the temptation to just throw your hands up and say, let's just split the difference, you have to visualize those mismatched shoes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, we really have to ask ourselves a difficult question. Why are we so deeply infatuated with compromise?
Yeah, if it leads to soggy tacos and mismatched shoes, why do we do it?
If it routinely leads to bad deals, why is it the default factory setting for human negotiation? The text offers a brilliant, slightly uncomfortable psychological diagnosis here. We do not compromise because it's morally right or because it yields the best results. We compromise because it's safe.
It's the path of absolute least emotional resistance.
Precisely. It allows both parties to save face. It allows us to walk away from a tense table, shrug our shoulders, and tell our boss or our spouse, well, I didn't get everything, but at least I got half the pie.
Yeah, sounds defensible.
Distilled to its absolute essence, we compromise to soothe our own anxiety. Most people entering a high-stakes conversation are not actually driven by the pursuit of their stated goals.
What are they driven by then?
They are driven by deeply ingrained fear of conflict, or a profound desire to avoid the visceral pain of an awkward, tense, prolonged interaction.
Oh, wow. So the ambition is sitting in the passenger seat, but the fear of conflict has both hands on the steering wheel.
Yes. And the truly great negotiators, according to the text, refuse to settle for that false comfort. They never split the difference. Because truly creative solutions, the kinds of asymmetrical agreements that actually solve the underlying problem rather than just putting a Band-Aid over it, are almost always preceded by a significant degree of risk, annoyance, confusion, and interpersonal friction.
You have to push through the awkwardness.
Accommodation bypasses all of that friction, which is exactly why it produces mediocre, mismatched results. You have to learn to sit comfortably in the friction.
Okay, so if the fear of conflict is what drives us into these terrible, self-sabotaging compromises, we have to examine what exactly is manufacturing that fear in the room. What turns up the pressure? And the text points a massive glowing neon arrow at one specific external factor.
The ticking clock.
The illusion of time and the power of deadlines.
Deadlines are the screw that pressures almost every single deal to a conclusion.
Exactly. And to see the sheer manipulative power of a deadline, let's jump back into that terrifying situation in Haiti. So the FBI team is on the ground, dealing with this massive surge in kidnappings. And after weeks of chaos and analyzing the data, they begin to notice a rhythm. Two distinct patterns, actually.
Okay, what were they?
First, Mondays are incredibly busy. The kidnappers are highly active, snatching people off the streets left and right at the start of the week. Second, as the week drags on and Thursday and Friday roll around, the kidnappers' behavior on the phone changes drastically.
How so?
They become increasingly agitated, anxious, short-tempered, and desperately eager to get paid immediately.
At first glance, looking through a purely analytical lens, this pattern is really confusing. I mean, the initial working theory within the intelligence community was that these kidnappers were organized political terrorists trying to systematically destabilize the newly formed government.
Which makes sense on paper.
But political terrorists, driven by ideological fanaticism, operate on long-term, multi-year timelines. They do not care if a ransom is paid on a Tuesday or a Saturday.
Right. A revolutionary doesn't care about the weekend. So, by actively listening to the kidnapper's exact phrasing on the phone and meticulously debriefing the rescued hostages about what they overheard while in captivity, the FBI realized something that completely shifted their paradigm.
They weren't masterminds.
These guys were not sophisticated political masterminds. They were just garden variety street thugs, and their primary motivation for the kidnappings, they wanted to get a massive payout by Friday afternoon so they could go out and party aggressively through the weekend.
Wow. Which completely, fundamentally changes the entire landscape of the negotiation. It reveals the underlying psychology of time. The text explains that a deadline's power lies in its ability to create an overwhelming perception of future loss.
That fear of missing out.
It's that panicked voice in the back of your head screaming, if we don't resolve this contract by Friday at 5 p.m., the entire deal is off and we lose everything. Or, in the terrifying reality of Haiti, if we don't pay by Friday, they're going to execute her. But what the FBI behavioral analyst realized was that the Friday deadline was actually the kidnapper's vulnerability, not the family's.
Yes. Because knowing that the kidnappers had this entirely self-imposed deadline to get their weekend party money shifted the leverage entirely to the FBI. The negotiators now knew two vital pieces of information.
What did they figure out?
First, if they purposefully stalled the negotiations, dragging out the phone calls until Thursday night or Friday morning, the kidnappers' internal anxiety would peak. This would make them desperate and much more likely to make massive concessions just to close a deal and get some cash.
Right, because time is running out for them.
Exactly. And second, you do not need $150,000 to have a wild weekend in Port-au-Prince. A tiny fraction of that demand would satisfy their actual unstated dream.
What the text is illuminating here is that deadlines are almost exclusively self-inflicted bogeymen. They're psychological constructs, often entirely arbitrary, that trick our brains into thinking that doing a deal right now is inherently more valuable than getting a good deal later.
But this brings up a massive strategic question for you, the listener. If the other side's deadline is my weapon, if I can use their ticking clock to force them into concessions, shouldn't I be doing everything in my power to hide my own deadline?
Give it a secret.
Yeah. Shouldn't I treat my internal clock like a poker hand, holding it close to the chest so my counterpart can't use it against me?
It's a profoundly logical question, and frankly, if you read negotiation literature from the 1980s and 90s, hiding your deadline is exactly what the old-school experts will vehemently tell you to do.
Right, and the text actually brings up a famous foundational story from 1980 to illustrate this old-school mindset. It involves a renowned negotiation expert named Herb Cohen.
The Japan trip.
Yes, so Cohen was sent by his American company over to Japan to negotiate a massive supply contract with a major Japanese firm. When he arrived in Tokyo, his Japanese host greeted him warmly and asked, in what seemed like polite conversational filler, how long are you staying with us?
A seemingly innocent, completely standard exchange of logistical information.
Totally innocent. So Cohen, thinking nothing of it, said, oh, about a week. My return flight is next Friday afternoon.
Oh, man.
Right. But for the next 7 days, the Japanese hosts did absolutely everything except negotiate the contract. They wined him, they dined him, they took him on extensive cultural tours of the city, they threw lavish dinners in his honor.
It sounds like a spectacular, luxurious vacation.
It was, but every time Cohen tried to bring up the contract, they politely deflected. So finally, it's Friday morning. Cohen is packing his bags in his hotel room, just sweating. They put him in a car to head to the airport, and that is the exact moment the Japanese negotiators open their briefcases and the serious talks begin.
In the car.
They hammer out the final, highly complex details of the multi-million-dollar deal in the backseat of a moving car, while Cohen is literally looking at his watch, racing to catch his international flight.
They placed him in the ultimate manufactured pressure cooker.
Exactly. Cohen boards his flight, lands back in the U.S., and has this sinking, terrible realization that he got completely played. He reviewed the contract and realized he had made massive, unnecessary financial concessions simply because the psychological pressure of his flight leaving was crushing him. He just wanted to get it done.
He was desperate.
So his ultimate conclusion, which he published and which became gospel for decades, was never reveal your deadline to your counterpart because it simply hands them a weapon to use against you. He wrote, "They knew my deadline, but I didn't know theirs."
And on the surface, hearing that story, it sounds like a perfectly rational, indisputable takeaway. But the source material for our deep dive today argues that Cohen and the entire subsequent herd of traditional experts who followed his lead missed the mark completely.
Wait, really? Because I have to say, Cohen's logic tracks for me. His experience seems to empirically prove his point. If they didn't know about his flight, they couldn't have squeezed him in the car.
It certainly appears that way. But the text points out that Cohen's analysis ignores a fundamental structural dynamic of any negotiation. Deadlines, by their very nature, cut both ways.
What do you mean?
Well, yes, Cohen was incredibly anxious about going home to his American bosses, empty-handed without a signed contract. But think about the Japanese supplier. If Cohen gets on that plane without signing the papers, The Japanese firm also loses a massive lucrative deal.
Oh, right.
When the metaphorical clock runs out and the negotiation is over for one side, it is simultaneously over for the other side, too.
Oh, wow. I actually hadn't thought about the reciprocal nature of the clock. If time runs out on me, the exact same amount of time runs out on you, the loss is mutual.
Precisely. And to back this up with empirical data, the text cites some fascinating research conducted by Don A. Moore, a prominent professor at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business.
Okay, what did he find?
Moore and his team ran extensive simulations studying this exact phenomenon of asymmetrical deadline information. And what they found completely upended the Erb-Cohen doctrine. Moore's research proved that hiding your deadline from your counterpart actually puts you in the worst possible strategic position.
Really?
Yeah, it dramatically, measurably increases the risk of an absolute impasse, meaning no deal happens at all.
Why is that? What is the cognitive mechanism that makes hiding a deadline backfire so badly?
Let's illustrate it with a high-profile example. Imagine a professional sports labor dispute, like a bitter NBA lockout. The billionaire team owners are negotiating revenue sharing with the players' union. The owners have a secret internal drop-dead date in mind. Let's say it's November 1st.
Okay.
If they do not have a signed collective bargaining agreement by November 1st, they will begin canceling regular season games and losing catastrophic amounts of television broadcast revenue. But following the old school advice, they stubbornly keep this November 1st deadline a total secret from the players.
Okay, so the owners are hiding their cards.
Now, watch what happens behaviorally as the calendar turns to late October. As November 1st rapidly approaches, the owners start to internally panic. The pressure of their secret clock is crushing them. So, in an effort to force a resolution before the deadline, the owners suddenly start speeding up the pace of their concessions.
Yeah, they're just folding.
Right. They start offering significantly better terms, dropping their previous demands, trying to entice the players to sign immediately.
But the players have absolutely no idea that the November 1st clock is ticking.
Exactly. The players are completely blind to the deadline driving this sudden generosity. All the players see is that the billionaire owners who were playing hardball yesterday are suddenly caving and offering millions of dollars more today.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The players look at this and rationally conclude, wow, we must have incredible leverage. We have all the time in the world, and they are already folding. If they're offering this much today, imagine what they will offer next week. Let's just hold out and stall for even more.
That's fascinating.
By hiding the deadline, the owners are essentially negotiating entirely against themselves. They create an environment that actively incentivizes the players to stall, which makes the owner's secret deadline even more likely to blow up in their faces.
That makes profound sense because the players misinterpret the sudden concessions as a sign of infinite weakness rather than a sign of a looming mutual deadline. So Moore's research suggests that openly revealing your cutoff date actually anchors reality for both sides and gets everyone to the real deal-making faster.
Yes. Moore's data clearly shows that when negotiators are transparent and proactively tell their counterparts about their exact deadline, they secure significantly better deals on average. It massively reduces the risk of an impasse because both sides are operating with the exact same information about how much time is left on the shot clock.
So hiding it just causes chaos.
Deadlines make human beings act irrationally, absolutely. But hiding those deadlines makes us act even more irrationally because it distorts our perception of leverage.
Okay, so we've established that the pressure of deadlines exposes our underlying irrationality. We panic, we make weird concessions. But the text argues that nothing, absolutely no psychological phenomenon, exposes the deeply irrational, purely emotional core of the human brain, quite like our concept of fairness.
Ah, yes. The concept's so volatile that the text simply refers to it as the F word.
The F word. Fairness. And to truly understand why fairness completely short-circuits human logic, the text introduces one of the most famous foundational behavioral economics experiments ever devised, the ultimatum game.
I love this one.
We have to walk through the mechanics of this game because it completely shatters the idea that we are rational economic actors.
It really is a brilliant, elegant demonstration of how little we actually understand about our own internal decision-making process.
Right. Here is how the ultimatum game is set up. You have two participants, a proposer and an acceptor. The researcher walks into the room and hands the proposer a crisp $10 bill. The rules are simple. The proposer has to offer a split of that $10 to the acceptor. It can be any whole number split. The proposer could offer $5 and keep 5. They could offer 7 and keep 3. They could keep 9 and offer 1.
Right. The proposer dictates the terms.
But here is the critical catch that makes the game work. If the acceptor agrees to the proposed split, they both keep the money exactly as divided. But if the acceptor feels the split is unacceptable and refuses the offer, they both get absolutely nothing. The $10 vanishes back into the researcher's pocket.
So let's analyze this through the lens of pure cold logic.
Pure economic rationality, the kind of logic that early economists assumed governed all human behavior, dictates exactly how this game should go. The proposer, acting to maximize their own wealth, should offer the absolute minimum possible amount, $1. They keep 9, they give away 1.
And the acceptor, acting as a purely rational economic machine, should always enthusiastically accept that $1 offer.
Exactly. Why? Because $1 is mathematically infinitely better than $0.
According to standard economic theory, getting something is always superior to getting nothing. Emotion shouldn't enter the equation.
Exactly. But when researchers actually sit real human beings down in a room and play this game, the results completely destroy the economic models.
Totally destroy them.
Almost no proposer ever offers a 9-to-1 split. They usually offer something closer to 5-to-5 because they anticipate the reaction. And on the rare occasions when a proposer does try to offer just $1 or $2, the acceptor almost always violently rejects it.
They'd rather have nothing.
Yes, people will routinely look at a free offer of $1, $2, or even $3 and actively choose to receive $0, specifically to ensure that the arrogant proposer also gets 0.
Let's really emphasize what is happening there. The acceptor is willingly paying a real financial cost out of their own pocket simply to punish the other person for what they perceive as an unfair distribution of unearned wealth.
Yes, they are buying revenge. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the reasoning we use to make decisions is heavily governed by emotional resonance, not mathematical rationality.
We are not Excel spreadsheets.
Not at all. We are highly sensitive emotional barometers. And the neuroscience fully backs this up. The text extensively references the groundbreaking work of neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, detailed in his book Descartes' Error.
Oh, this is fascinating stuff.
Damasio studied a very specific group of patients who had suffered severe localized brain damage, specifically to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. This is a vital area where emotional responses are generated and processed.
And what Damasio discovered by observing these patients was nothing short of profound for the field of psychology. These individuals retained their high IQs, their memory was intact. They could look at a complex scenario and describe it in perfect, flawless logical terms.
Right, they weren't cognitively impaired in that way.
Exactly. They could effortlessly generate lists of the pros and cons of any given situation. But they all shared one bizarre, paralyzing deficit. They were entirely incapable of making decisions.
They were locked in an endless loop of analysis paralysis. One patient famously spent hours just trying to decide whether to sign a document with a blue pen or a black pen, endlessly weighing the microscopic variables.
Because without the emotional center to attach a good or bad feeling to a specific outcome, decision-making is neurologically impossible.
Wow.
Tier logic can only reason us toward a decision by laying out the variables. It is the emotional center that actually governs the choice. Emotion is what finally pulls the trigger and says, this feels right, let's do this.
And the most deeply ingrained, most powerfully explosive emotional trigger of all is fair. The text notes that the concept of fairness specifically targets and lights up the insular cortex in the brain, the same area that regulates negative emotions like disgust and pain.
It's a very visceral reaction.
It's so deeply hardwired into our evolutionary biology that we aren't even the only species that reacts violently to it. There is this incredibly famous study involving capuchin monkeys that the text mentions.
Ah, the cucumber and grape study by primatologist Franz de Waal. It's an absolute classic in behavioral science.
It is hilarious to watch on video, but the implications are staggering. You have 2 capuchin monkeys in adjacent transparent cages. They can clearly see each other. They are trained by a researcher to perform a very simple economic task, handing a small rock through a hole in the glass to the researcher.
Okay.
When they hand over the rock, they get a food reward. At first, the system is perfectly equitable. Both monkeys hand over their rocks, and both monkeys receive a plain slice of cucumber.
And monkeys like cucumbers, right?
Monkeys like cucumbers. They are perfectly content. They eat the cucumber, happily grab another rock, and repeat the transaction. The economy is functioning flawlessly.
They are completely satisfied with their established level of compensation.
Right, the absolute value of the cucumber is established as good, but then the researcher deliberately introduces inequality into the system.
Here we go.
The first monkey does the task, hands over the rock, but instead of the standard cucumber, the researcher gives it a sweet, juicy grape. Now, grapes are the absolute premium currency in the monkey world. They love grapes.
That's like getting a massive bonus.
Exactly. The second monkey, sitting right next door, watches this happen. It sees the new, higher standard of pay, so the second monkey eagerly does the task, hands over its rock, fully expecting to receive a grape. And the researcher, deadpan, hands it a plain slice of cucumber.
And what is the reaction?
The monkey literally loses its mind. It looks at the cucumber, looks at the other monkey eating a grape, looks back at the researcher, and then aggressively throws the cucumber right back through the hole at the researcher's face.
Oh.
It grabs the cage bars, starts violently shaking them, and screams in absolute outrage. Now think about this. The cucumber itself hasn't changed. Its nutritional value is identical. 5 minutes ago, that exact same cucumber was a perfectly acceptable reward.
Right.
But the sudden introduction of relative unfairness completely destroyed the monkey's rational acceptance of the food.
The negative emotional pain generated by the perceived unfairness vastly outweighed the positive, rational nutritional value of the cucumber. The monkey preferred to go hungry rather than accept an unfair deal.
That's crazy.
And this evolutionary quirk is not just limited to capuchin monkeys or college students playing $10 games in a lab. This visceral, irrational reaction to unfairness scales up to the absolute highest, most sophisticated levels of human interaction in economics.
Yeah, the text gives an amazing real-world example of this exact phenomenon from the highest echelons of Hollywood. It involves the late, great Robin Williams, specifically regarding his iconic voiceover work as the genie in Disney's 1992 animated film Aladdin.
A legendary performance.
Now, at that time, Robin Williams was a massive global star. He usually commanded an enormous $8 million salary to star in a major motion picture. But for Aladdin, he agreed to do it for a tiny cut-rate union scale fee of just $75,000.
That's practically nothing for him.
He stated he wanted to leave something wonderful behind for his kids, and he happily, voluntarily signed the contract for $75,000.
$75,000 for a role that carried the entire film. It was a massive, generous discount on his market value.
Huge! He was perfectly happy with his cucumber. But then, the movie hits theaters. And it doesn't just do well, it becomes a historic global cultural phenomenon. It rakes in over $500 million at the box office, plus untold millions in merchandise. And suddenly, Robin Williams goes absolutely ballistic.
He and his representation were extremely vocal in the press about how he had been exploited and ripped off by the studio.
But wait, let's look at this closely through the exact lens of the ultimatum game and the monkey experiment. Was Robin Williams angry because he was living in poverty and desperately needed the money? No, he was incredibly wealthy.
Right.
Was he technically legally robbed by Disney? No. He freely signed a legal contract for a set amount. He only became furious after he saw the movie make $500 million. It was the perceived unfairness of the revenue split that triggered the emotional explosion. He suddenly felt exactly like the $1 acceptor in the $10 game. He looked at Disney making hundreds of millions while he got a tiny fraction, and his insular cortex lit up with disgust.
The fascinating part is how Disney's executives responded. They recognized the immense destructive power of that perceived unfairness. They knew they had a massive PR disaster on their hands that logic couldn't solve.
They couldn't just point to the contract.
Exactly. They didn't just point to the signed legal contract and say, hey, a deal is a deal, Robin. They knew they had to balance the emotional scales. So they purchased a genuine Picasso painting, reportedly worth around $1 million, and sent it to him as a dramatic, highly visible gesture specifically designed to address his feeling of being treated unfairly.
It's an incredible story about how absolute value means nothing when compared to relative fairness. And the text actually takes this concept of fairness and applies it to an even more extreme, mind-boggling scale, moving all the way from Hollywood salary disputes to the incredibly tense world of global geopolitics.
Yes, the source material provides a very specific historical example regarding Iran and its nuclear program. And we should point out as we delve into this, that we are looking strictly at the behavioral and psychological mechanisms provided in the text regarding how nations negotiate.
Right.
The text uses this example purely to illustrate the economic cost of perceived unfairness, without weighing in on the broader political ideologies involved.
Right, we're just looking at the math versus the emotion. According to the text's analysis over the past several years, Iran has endured punishing international economic sanctions that have cost the nation well over $100 billion in lost foreign investment, frozen assets, and lost oil revenue.
That is a staggering amount of money.
They have consciously absorbed this massive, crippling financial blow, specifically in order to defend their right to maintain a uranium-enriching nuclear program.
And here's the crucial data point the source highlights to make its case. That specific nuclear program, despite the international uproar, only possesses the capacity to meet roughly 2% of the country's total energy needs.
So if you sit down and look at that purely rationally, purely economically, it looks like absolute madness. Why on earth would a nation choose to lose $100 billion in actual cash for a program that barely moves the needle on their domestic energy grid?
It makes no logical sense.
It's exactly like the college student who angrily rejects the $1 because the $9 split feels insulting. They are actively choosing massive, tangible economic pain.
And the source material asks the fundamental question, why? And the answer, once again, is the F word, fairness. For Iran's leadership, the text explains, it is perceived as a fundamental existential unfairness that global superpowers, who themselves possess thousands of active nuclear weapons, dictate whether Iran has the right to develop its own nuclear energy capabilities.
Well, I see.
It ceases to be a conversation about megawatts of electricity or billions of dollars. It becomes a conversation about perceived integrity, national pride, and independent identity.
The text actually quotes a former Iranian nuclear negotiator, Said Hossein Mousavian, who laid this exact psychology out perfectly. He said, "The nuclear issue today for Iranians is not nuclear, it's defending their integrity as an independent identity against the pressure of the rest."
Which perfectly encapsulates the entire theory. The text uses this as its ultimate evidence that rejecting perceived unfairness, even when that rejection literally costs a nation $100 billion, is an immensely powerful, overriding human motivation.
And it's way more powerful than math.
It drives decisions at the table far more powerfully than any spreadsheet of pure economic logic ever could.
But here's where this gets really interesting for you, the listener. Because once you deeply recognize how powerful the F word is, once you realize that it completely short-circuits rational thought, you realize that skilled negotiators actively use it as a weapon against you.
Oh, they absolutely do.
The text breaks down 3 distinct ways the word fair is deployed in negotiations, and crucially, how you must train yourself to handle them.
This is an incredibly practical defensive toolkit, because if you negotiate long enough, you are guaranteed to encounter these exact tactics.
The first use of the word is what the text categorizes as the defensive or destabilizing use. This happens when you are deep in a negotiation and the other person suddenly sighs, looks at you, and says, "Look, we just want what's fair."
It sounds so innocent, but it is actually a highly potent implicit accusation.
Exactly. The text gives a great everyday example. A friend of the author was trying to sell her house in Boston during a particularly brutal real estate market bust.
Okay, stressful situation.
Very. She's getting lowball offers left and right, and she is incredibly stressed. Finally, she's sitting across from a prospective buyer who is trying to negotiate the price down. She gets frustrated, drops the F-bomb, and just says, "We just want what's fair."
And what did the buyer do?
The buyer, who was previously playing hardball, is suddenly emotionally rattled by the subtle implication that they are acting unethically or being unfair. Driven by the need to prove they are a good person, the buyer immediately caves and raises their offer.
The phrase triggers an instant feeling of defensiveness and deep discomfort in the counterpart. It completely bypasses the logical, calculating part of the brain and lands a direct hit on that insular cortex.
We really want to be seen as good people.
We subconsciously, desperately want to view ourselves and have others view us as good, reasonable, fair people. So when someone implies we aren't, we will often make completely irrational financial concessions just to clear our name and restore our self-image.
So how does an expert negotiator defend against this? Like if you're at a car dealership and the salesman hits you with, "I just want what's fair," the text says you must catch yourself.
Take a breath.
Take a deep breath. Consciously restrain your immediate burning instinct to concede and apologize, and say this exact phrase. "Okay, I apologize. Let's stop everything right here and go back to exactly where I started treating you unfairly, and we'll fix it."
That response is a masterpiece of verbal judo. First, it acknowledges and validates their emotional claim with an apology, which de-escalates the tension. Second, it neutralizes the implicit accusation. And third, and most importantly, It forces the counterpart to point to a specific, factual, data-driven instance of unfairness in your offer, which, if you have been negotiating in good faith, usually doesn't exist. You force them out of the emotional realm and back into the logical realm.
The second use of the F word is much more aggressive and nefarious. It is used as a deliberate jab. This is when your counterpart leans across the table and firmly declares, "We've given you a fair offer."
Ah, yes. This is not a defensive plea. This is a calculated maneuver designed to distract your attention and manipulate you into submitting to their terms.
Because it implies you're being unreasonable.
By unilaterally declaring their own offer to be fair, they are implicitly accusing you of being dense, greedy, or fundamentally dishonest if you do not immediately accept it.
The text uses a massive corporate clash, the NFL labor lockout, as a prime example of this tactic. Negotiations between the billionaire team owners and the players' union were getting incredibly tense, coming down to the wire. The players made a very specific, logical demand. They said, "Before we agree to this new revenue split, we want you to open your financial books. Let us actually see the revenue data so we can verify the numbers." The owner's response was fascinating. They didn't say yes, and they didn't say no.
What did they do?
Instead, they walked out to the press microphones and simply stated, "We've given the players a fair offer."
Notice the horrible, manipulative genius of that pivot. Instead of addressing the actual substantive request, opening the financial books to prove the math, they shifted the entire public narrative.
It totally changed the conversation.
They framed the situation around the players' supposed lack of understanding of what constitutes fairness. It puts the players instantly on the defensive.
So if your boss or a contractor drops that nefarious F-bomb on you and says, "I've given you a fair offer," how do you counter it? The text advises using a specific psychological technique called mirroring. Instead of getting angry, you simply repeat the specific word back to them with an upward, genuinely curious questioning inflection. You just say, "Fair."
Just that one word.
Fair. And then you close your mouth and pause. You let the incredibly uncomfortable silence do the heavy lifting in the room. Then you follow up with a calm label. It seems like you're ready to provide the evidence that supports that.
It is brilliant because it immediately declaws the attack without escalating the conflict. You are politely but firmly calling their bluff. You are asking them to justify their subjective claim of fairness with actual objective data. It puts the burden of proof entirely back on them.
And then there is the third and final use of the F word. And the text argues that this is the best one, the positive, highly constructive use. This is how you proactively set the stage for honest dealing and build immense trust right out of the gate.
It is a preemptive strike of goodwill.
Right. Very early on in a negotiation, before numbers are even discussed, you look the other person directly in the eye and say, "I want you to feel like you are being treated fairly at all times in this process, so please, I want you to stop me at any time if you feel I'm being unfair, and we will address it immediately."
By volunteering that statement, you instantly establish yourself as an empathetic, honest dealer. You give them explicit permission to use the powerful F word, but you attach a condition. They can only use it honestly to point out a real issue. You are framing the entire interaction from minute one around mutual respect and transparency.
So to recap where we are, we've firmly established that human beings are fundamentally irrational, deeply emotional creatures who are heavily driven by the perception of fairness and highly susceptible to the panic induced by ticking clocks.
Yes, that is the baseline.
Once we fully accept that cold, hard logic often takes a back seat, we can stop trying to argue facts and start framing our offers to speak directly to those powerful emotional drivers. And this brings us to a profound shift in how we view the art of selling and persuasion, rooted in a concept called prospect theory.
This is the critical transition point in our deep dive. We're moving from simply understanding the quirky psychology of the human brain to learning how to actively, strategically utilize it at the table.
The text references a highly influential business book called How to Become a Rainmaker, which fundamentally redefines what sales, marketing, and negotiation actually are at their core. It argues that a successful pitch is never a rational, bulleted argument about features, specifications, and logical benefits.
It's an emotional framing job.
Entirely. You have to figure out what the person across from you is really buying on a psychological level.
Because human beings rarely, if ever, buy the physical thing itself. They buy the emotional payoff that they believe the thing will provide them.
Exactly. The text gives 3 quick, perfect, real-world examples to illustrate this shift in perspective. First, what does a highly sought-after babysitter actually sell? They aren't selling their ability to feed up mac and cheese or watch a toddler sleep.
No, they're selling a relaxed, stress-free, romantic evening out for the exhausted parents.
Right. What does a salesperson selling expensive home furnaces actually sell? They aren't selling a complex metal box that burns natural gas efficiently. They're selling the emotional vision of cozy, warm rooms for family time in the dead of winter.
And what does a locksmith sell? It's not brass deadbolts and newly cut keys. They sell the profound, comforting feeling of physical security for a family.
It is all about uncovering the underlying emotional driver. Once you identify whether they are desperate for relaxation, coziness, security, or status, you can frame the terms of your deal using language that resonates perfectly with that deep subconscious need. You align your offer with their dream.
And a massive part of that emotional framing involves understanding the absolute mind-bending fluidity of value.
Oh, this part is wild.
We tend to think of a dollar as a dollar or an object as having a fixed, inherent worth. But value is not a fixed number. It is an illusion. The text illustrates this vividly with a simple coffee mug.
Specifically, a standard red and white ceramic mug with a Swiss flag printed on it.
Okay, let's play this behavioral experiment out to see how fluid value really is.
If I hold up this completely standard, slightly used coffee mug and ask you, purely as an objective observer, what it is worth on the open market, you might look at it, assess its utility, and say, I don't know, maybe $3.50.
Which would have a perfectly rational, accurate market evaluation for a used ceramic mug.
Right. That is its objective value. But let's change the scenario. Let's say I give you the mug, I hand it to you, it is yours now, you own it, and then 5 minutes later I look at you and say, hey, I actually really like that mug, I want it back. How much will you sell it to me for?
The text points out, backed by numerous behavioral studies on the endowment effect, that you are probably going to demand something between $5 and $7.
For the exact same physical mug.
The exact same mug.
No chips were fixed, no hot coffee was added to it, the market for mugs hasn't changed. Literally all that happened was that the mug's relationship to you shifted.
You took psychological ownership of it.
Yes, and suddenly, magically, its value doubled in your own mind. You value what you possess significantly more than what you don't.
It is a perfect demonstration that value is entirely subjective, deeply emotional, and completely context-dependent.
The text gives an even more visceral, relatable example of how context manipulates our sense of value. Imagine I come to you and offer you a crisp $20 bill to run a very quick, extremely simple 3-minute errand for me. Just walk down to the corner and grab me a specific cup of coffee.
Okay, simple favor.
You do the rapid math in your head. Getting paid $20 for 3 minutes of light walking equates to a staggering hourly wage of roughly $400 an hour.
Any rational person would be absolutely thrilled. It is an incredibly lucrative, fantastic deal for your time.
You're ecstatic. You take the 20, you run the errand, you feel great. But then later that day, imagine you find out a hidden piece of context. You discover that by getting you to run that specific 3-minute errand, I somehow closed a massive deal and made a pure profit of $1 million.
The emotional feeling instantly, violently shifts.
You go from being thrilled about making $400 an hour to being furiously, indignantly angry because you suddenly feel like you got completely ripped off and exploited.
But think about the absolute facts. The $20 in your pocket didn't change. The 3 minutes of walking didn't change. The physical reality is identical.
Right.
Your perspective of the value changed solely because the context of the larger pie shifted.
And the text is very clear here. It's not pointing these psychological quirks out just to laugh at how easily fooled and irrational human beings are. It is highlighting them because while our decisions are deeply irrational, they are not random.
There are highly consistent, universally applicable patterns and principles governing this irrationality. If you understand the pattern, you can predict the behavior.
And the absolute granddaddy of all these behavioral principles, the holy grail of understanding human decision-making, is called prospect theory.
Yes, developed in 1979 by two brilliant psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Kahneman actually won a Nobel Prize for this work.
It's that big of a deal.
It is arguably the most important foundational behavioral economics theory of the entire 20th century. Essentially, it describes the precise mathematical and psychological ways that people choose between different options when those options involve risk and uncertainty. It completely dismantled the old economic idea of the perfectly rational human actor.
And the text breaks down two massive, highly actionable pillars of prospect theory that we use directly in negotiation. The first pillar is known as the certainty effect.
The certainty effect is a cognitive bias that simply states that human beings are irresistibly drawn to guaranteed, sure things over calculated probabilities, even when the probability mathematically offers a significantly higher expected outcome. We will pay a premium for absolute certainty because uncertainty creates cognitive anxiety.
But the second pillar is the real heavy hitter. It is the secret weapon of negotiation: loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
The fundamental principle is that people will take significantly greater, wilder risks to avoid suffering a loss than they will to achieve an equal or even greater gain.
Neurologically speaking, the psychological pain of losing $5 is experienced by the brain as roughly twice as intense as the joy of finding $5 on the street.
Twice as intense. This deep-seated aversion to loss is evolutionary. It's why people will happily pay high premiums for insurance policies, even when the statistical, mathematical probability of a disaster actually occurring is incredibly, vanishingly low.
The visceral, terrifying fear of a massive loss completely overrides the cold mathematical logic of the probability.
The text provides a fascinating statistical example to prove just how powerfully loss aversion twists our logic. Imagine you are participating in a study and you are given a choice between two positive options.
Okay.
Option A, you receive a guaranteed cash payment of $9,499, no strings attached. Option B, you are given a 95% statistical chance of winning an even $10,000, but a 5% chance of getting absolutely nothing.
Kahneman and Tversky found that the vast majority of people will eagerly choose option A, the guaranteed $9,499. They are exhibiting the certainty effect. They want to avoid the tiny 5% risk of walking away empty-handed, so they take the sure thing, even though option B has a higher mathematical expected value.
They are acting in a highly risk-averse manner when dealing with gains. But watch what happens when you flip the scenario from a gain to a loss.
Right. New scenario.
Option A, you are guaranteed to lose $9,499. You have to pay it no matter what. Option B, you have a 95% chance of losing the full $10,000, but a 5% chance of losing nothing at all.
In this negative scenario, the exact same person who took the safe bet 5 minutes ago will suddenly transform into a reckless risk taker.
It's completely backward.
They will happily gamble on the 95% chance of a more devastating loss solely for that tiny 5% sliver of hope that they can avoid a loss entirely.
It is a profound observation. The mere possibility of suffering a loss incites vastly more aggressive risk-taking behavior than the possibility of securing an equal gain. We are terrified of giving things up.
So, bringing this out of the laboratory and into the real world, what does this all mean for the listener? How do we actually use the psychological reality of loss aversion when we are sitting at the negotiating table?
The text provides a crucial paradigm-shifting lesson here. In a tough, high-stakes negotiation, it is never enough to simply show the other party the sunny upside. Showing them what they can gain from your proposal is nice, but gains do not trigger that deep, urgent, evolutionary psychological drive.
To manufacture real leverage, to force them to move off their position, you must systematically persuade them that they have something tangible, concrete, and painful to lose if the deal falls through.
You have to vividly paint a picture of the impending loss, make them feel the pain before it happens, and that brings us directly to the practical application of all this theory.
The toolkit.
The source material outlines 6 concrete, battle-tested tactics used by master negotiators to actually bend a counterpart's reality. They leverage deadlines, fairness, and loss aversion to completely reshape the conversation. Let's really take our time and go through these 6 reality-bending tactics one by one.
Sounds good. Tactic number 1, anchor their emotions.
This tactic is all about using a technique called an accusation audit to actively play on the counterpart's loss aversion. The text shares a fascinating story about the author doing high-level consulting work in the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
He was subcontracting out specific tasks to highly skilled contractors who normally commanded a premium rate of $2,000 a day. But due to severe budget problems with the general contractor above him, he had to call these guys up and deliver terrible news. He could only afford to pay them $500 a day for the upcoming project.
That is a staggering 75% pay cut. It's an insulting offer.
Exactly. If he had simply picked up the phone, called them, and straightforwardly said, "Hey guys, the budget got slashed, I can only give you $500 a day," what would have happened?
They would have laughed in his face, hung up the phone, and probably never accepted another job from him. The F word, the deep sense of unfairness, would have been triggered immediately and violently.
So instead of leading with the bad number, he used an accusation audit to purposefully anchor their emotions all the way down into the basement.
He essentially prepared their brains for the absolute worst-case scenario imaginable.
Right. He gets them on the phone, and before mentioning a single dollar amount, he says, I have a truly lousy proposition for you. In fact, by the time we get off this phone call, you are going to think I'm a completely lousy businessman. You are going to think I can't budget, I can't plan, and I don't know how to run a project. You're going to think I'm just a big talker who screws up operations and constantly lies to the people working for him.
Now, stop and think about the internal emotional state of the contractor on the other end of that phone line. They hear that preamble, and their brain goes into absolute overdrive. They are bracing for catastrophe.
They must be thinking the worst.
They are thinking, oh my God, what did he do? The whole massive project must be canceled. I'm losing everything. He's bankrupt. I'm not going to get paid for the work I've already done. Their loss aversion is fully inflamed, flashing red.
Exactly. He deliberately dug a massive emotional hole of impending loss, and then only once they were fully anticipating a total devastating loss of the entire relationship, he delivered the actual offer. He paused and said, still, despite all that, I wanted to bring this opportunity to you first before I took it to someone else. I can offer you $500 a day.
And instantly, the psychological perception of that $500 completely shifts.
It is no longer viewed as an insulting 75% pay cut. Because of the extreme negative anchor he set, it suddenly feels like a rescue. It is $500 a day that they aren't losing to a competitor.
And the result? Every single one of those elite contractors took the reduced deal without a single complaint. By anchoring their emotions incredibly low, he made a terrible lowball offer feel like a wave of relief.
That is brilliant. That leads us to the second tactic in the toolkit. Let the other guy go first, usually.
Right, because when it comes to the terrifying moment of actually naming a price in a negotiation, going first is incredibly dangerous. Neither side ever possesses perfect information about the market or the other person's limits.
The text illustrates the danger of going first with a classic, legendary Hollywood story. The famous director Billy Wilder was hiring the highly acclaimed detective novelist Raymond Chandler to write the screenplay for the 1944 film Double Indemnity,
which became an absolute masterpiece of the film noir genre.
a total classic. Now, Chandler was a brilliant novelist, but he was completely brand new to Hollywood. He didn't have an agent, and he had absolutely no idea what the standard going rates for screenwriters were.
He was going in blind.
But wanting to project confidence and show he was a tough, savvy negotiator, Chandler walks into the meeting with Wilder and the studio producer, puffs out his chest, and insists on making the first offer. He demands what he genuinely believes is a massive, borderline extortionate salary. He asks for $150 a week.
And to justify this huge number, he warns them, and it might take me 3 whole weeks to write this entire script.
And according to Hollywood legend, Billy Wilder and the producer had to physically restrain themselves from laughing out loud in the room.
Because they had internally budgeted and fully planned to pay him $750 a week.
Wow.
And they knew from experience that a feature-length script takes months to write, not weeks. By insisting on going first without knowing the landscape, Chandler anchored himself directly to the floor. If the producer hadn't eventually taken pity on his ignorance and told him to go hire a real agent, Chandler would have lost thousands of dollars.
But the text also adds a highly specific warning here regarding this tactic. Letting the other side go first works beautifully against amateurs. But if you are sitting across from a seasoned, veteran negotiator, letting them name the price first can be dangerous.
Why is that?
They are going to intentionally throw out an extreme anchor to try and artificially bend your reality. This plays on a well-documented cognitive heuristic called the anchor and adjustment effect.
The anchor and adjustment effect is a cognitive flaw, where the human brain relies far too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor, when making subsequent decisions.
So it skews your perception.
Right. If a real estate shark looks at your house and casually throws out a ridiculously, insultingly lowball number, your conscious brain knows it is ridiculous. But your subconscious brain still registers that number and unconsciously adjusts its expectations downward.
That's sneaky.
Suddenly, when they come back the next day with a second, slightly less ridiculous offer, your brain perceives it as incredibly reasonable, simply because it is being compared to the extreme anchor rather than the actual market value.
It is the exact same psychology behind retail sales. It's why an electronic gadget marked down from a clearly inflated suggested retail price of $600 down to $400 feels like an absolute steal, even if $400 is objectively still extremely expensive for what it is. The initial high number anchored your perception of its inherent value.
Okay, tactic number 3. Establish a range. If you find yourself in a situation where you do have to name a price first, or if you proactively want to guide the conversation without getting permanently locked into a bad single number, you should use a range. But a very specific, strategically designed type of range.
A bolstering range.
Yes. The text cites a comprehensive study conducted by Columbia Business School showing that job applicants who named a salary range received significantly higher final offers than those who just stated a single flat number.
That makes sense.
But the psychological trick is how you construct the range. The bottom number of your stated range should actually be the specific target number you want to achieve.
Oh, interesting. So if Jerry, from our previous example, had known what he was doing, and his actual target was $130,000, he shouldn't just ask for 130. Instead, he should use a bolstering range and say, based on my research of top-tier firms, people with my qualifications in this specific role generally receive between $130,000 and $170,000.
Exactly. It gets the point across elegantly without sounding like a hardline demand, which prevents the hiring manager from getting defensive. And because of that anchor and adjustment cognitive bias we just discussed, the hiring manager hears the extreme upper anchor of 170,000, and suddenly that floor of 130,000 looks like an absolute bargain.
They think they won.
They will often eagerly jump at offering your floor, feeling like they won a concession, which was your hidden goal all along.
Tactic number 4, pivot to non-monetary terms.
This is a huge unlock for people who get stuck. People get so hyper-focused, so rigidly hung up on the actual dollar amount. But a sophisticated negotiation is almost never just about dollars and cents. It is a complex web of value.
Right.
If you hit a hard impasse on price, you don't just walk away, you pivot. You start exploring variables that might be incredibly cheap or easy for the other side to give, but possess immense outsized value to you.
The text gives a fantastic personal example from the author's own life to illustrate this asymmetry of value. It involves a speaking engagement he was negotiating with the Memphis Bar Association.
Right. His standard established speaking fee for a keynote at that time was $25,000. The Bar Association came back and said they simply didn't have the budget. They offered a much, much lower number.
He understandably balked at the massive pay cut.
But instead of letting the deal die, they actively pivoted away from the cash and toward non-monetary terms. The association offered to feature an extensive, glowing profile of him on the cover of their monthly association magazine.
Now, analyze the cost of that. To the Bar Association, offering the magazine cover cost absolutely nothing. Zero marginal cost. They have to print the magazine anyway, and they have to put someone's face on the cover every single month. It is a sunk cost for them.
But to the author, being prominently featured on the cover of a respected trade magazine that is directly mailed to thousands of the country's top, high-paying lawyers was priceless, targeted advertising.
It's totally worth it.
It was worth vastly more in future business than the few $1,000s difference in his speaking fee. Plus, as he humorously notes in the text, it was something he could send to his mom to make her really proud. He accepted a steep discount on the upfront cash, but extracted massive, disproportionate value on the non-monetary side.
Tactic number 5. When you do finally have to talk hard numbers, use odd ones.
I love the behavioral psychology behind this one. The way the human brain processes numbers is fascinating. The text explains that numbers ending in 0 like 30,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 feel inherently soft. They feel like temporary placeholders. They feel like casual guesstimates pulled out of thin air.
And human nature looks at a round guesstimate and instinctively thinks, there is wiggle room there. I can negotiate that number down.
A round number actively invites a counteroffer. It practically begs for it.
But a highly specific, odd, precise number, like 37,263 levels, feels completely psychologically different to the person hearing it. It doesn't sound like a guess. It sounds like the unavoidable result of deep, meticulous, spreadsheet-driven calculation.
It feels immovable, like you calculated your overhead, your margins, and your taxes to arrive at that exact figure down to the penny. It carries a psychological weight of absolute permanence that discourages aggressive counteroffers.
And finally, tactic number 6, surprise with a gift.
This is about intentionally introducing a sudden, unexpected, and unprompted conciliatory gesture into a tense situation in order to trigger the powerful psychological dynamic of reciprocity. Human beings across almost all cultures feel deeply emotionally obliged to repay unexpected debts of kindness or concession.
The text uses a massive historic geopolitical event to illustrate the power of the surprise gift. November 1977. The Middle East is locked in decades of bitter, seemingly intractable conflict.
Right.
Egyptian President Anwar Sadat makes a sudden, completely unannounced, unprecedented trip to Jerusalem to directly address the Israeli Knesset. It was an incredibly generous, incredibly risky diplomatic gesture. Now, importantly, his speech didn't actually involve conceding any physical territory or changing any hardline policies at that moment.
But the pure, unprompted gesture of showing up signified such a massive, vulnerable step toward peace that it triggered a powerful reciprocal response from the Israelis, fundamentally breaking the ice and pushing the historic Egypt-Israel peace treaty forward.
Okay, so we have laid out the entire six-part reality-bending toolkit. Anchor their emotions low, let them go first to avoid bidding against yourself, use a bolstering range if you must go first, pivot to asymmetrical non-monetary terms when cash gets tight, use highly specific odd numbers to project unyielding calculation, and surprise with a non-monetary gift to trigger reciprocity.
Now let's bring all of this theory together into one cohesive action plan. Let's travel back to Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Yeah.
Back to the violent kidnappers who were demanding $150,000 for the politician's aunt.
Let's do it.
We're going to watch the FBI negotiator orchestrate an absolute masterclass using these exact six tools in sequence to completely bend the kidnapper's reality.
This is the climax of the kidnapping scenario.
So the nephew is designated as the communicator. He is on the phone, the family has scrambled, and they can legitimately only scrape together maybe $50,000 to $85,000 total. But the FBI knows, based on the Friday deadline, that these are just thugs looking for weekend party money.
The FBI's internal target isn't 50,000. Their target is closer to 5,000.
They are completely rejecting the win-win. They are not splitting the difference. They are going for a total psychological victory.
First, the nephew, coached by the FBI, anchors their emotions. The kidnapper gets on the phone, aggressively demands the money, and graphically threatens the aunt's life. Now, the nephew doesn't scream no, which would trigger the kidnapper's pride and force an escalation.
Instead, he questions their fairness, shifting the problem back onto them. He says in a desperate tone, "I'm sorry, I love my aunt, but how am I supposed to pay you if you're going to hurt her?"
Notice the brilliant phrasing. He anchors their attention entirely on the potential loss of their commodity. The kidnappers are suddenly forced to realize that if they lose their temper and she dies, their leverage evaporates and they get absolutely nothing for the weekend.
Exactly. And notice what else the nephew didn't do. He didn't offer a counter number. He used tactic 2, let the other guy go first. He just asked a how question and waited. The tactic of sheer attrition works. The kidnappers, unprompted and negotiating entirely against themselves, dropped their demand from $150,000 all the way down to $50,000.
A massive $100,000 drop achieved just by holding the line, asking an open-ended question, and making them focus on loss aversion.
But then the nephew pushes the exact same button again. How can I possibly come up with that kind of money? The kidnapper, feeling the pressure of his own Friday deadline approaching, drops again, all the way to $25,000. Now the FBI tells the nephew it is finally time to strike. They instruct him to throw out an extreme low anchor to trigger the anchor and adjustment effect. He offers $3,000.
The line goes dead silent. The kidnapper is completely shell-shocked. His reality, his expectation of a massive payday, has just been violently, abruptly bent.
The kidnapper regroups, comes back, and counters at $10,000. He is getting desperate. The weekend is here. Now, the FBI deploys tactic number 5. They tell the nephew to stop using round numbers. They give him a highly specific, strange, odd number that sounds deeply calculated. The nephew gets on the phone and offers exactly $4,751.
It is such a bizarrely specific number. It sounds to the kidnapper like the nephew has literally emptied every single bank account, drained his savings, and checked under the couch cushions for loose change. It implies there is not a single dollar left in the world to give.
The kidnapper counters one last week time at $7,500. And here is where the FBI closes the trap. Tactic number 6, surprise with a non-monetary gift. The nephew spontaneously says, "Listen, I'll give you the $4,751 and I will throw in a brand new portable CD stereo I have."
A portable CD stereo in exchange for a human life.
The kidnappers don't even want a CD stereo. It has negligible street value. But the extreme, rigid specificity of the odd number, combined with the desperate, pathetic offering of a random physical object, completely bends their perception of reality. They are fully convinced, emotionally and logically, that there is not a single penny left to extract from this family. The stereo proves they have hit rock bottom. They say yes.
That's incredible.
6 hours later, the family pays the $4,751, hands over a cheap stereo, and the aunt comes home completely safely.
It is genuinely breathtaking. It is a stunning, high-stakes, real-world application of psychological leverage. They use loss aversion, extreme anchoring, precise odd numbers, and non-monetary pivots to reduce a life-or-death ransom by nearly 97%. But as intense and cinematic as an international hostage negotiation is, the source material makes a crucial pivot here.
Yes, it brings it back home.
It argues that these exact same principles, these exact same psychological levers, apply directly to the most common yet anxiety-inducing negotiation you, the listener, will probably ever face, negotiating your own salary.
Which brings us to the ultimate masterclass section of the text, applying life-or-death tactics to the corporate boardroom.
The text mentions that the author, when teaching at a prestigious business school, confidently tells his MBA students that his personal goal is to single-handedly raise their university's National Business School ranking simply by teaching them how to negotiate significantly better starting compensation packages than graduates from rival schools. And he breaks his corporate negotiation strategy down into a highly repeatable three-step process.
Step 1 of the process. Be pleasantly persistent on non-salary terms.
Pleasant persistence. This is crucial because it is about emotional anchoring. It creates empathy and likability with the boss, avoiding the adversarial trap. The text tells a charming story of a French-born MBA student who is negotiating a lucrative job offer in the U.S.
Okay, what happened?
She kept asking, with a big, bright, incredibly warm smile, for an extra week of paid vacation. She would just smile and say, "I'm French, taking August off is what we do." Now, the hiring company's HR policy was totally rigid. They mechanically could not budge on granting extra vacation days to a new hire.
But because she was so incredibly pleasant about it, and because she introduced a non-monetary variable that they structurally couldn't meet, the hiring managers felt a powerful reciprocal need to compensate her elsewhere. Her pleasantness triggered the reciprocity of a gift.
Exactly. They felt bad saying no to someone so nice, so they proactively countered their own inability to give her vacation time by significantly increasing her starting base salary offer.
That's step 1 with step 2.
Step 2 of the process. Define success terms explicitly. The text argues that negotiating a high salary without defining the specific metrics of success is like playing corporate Russian roulette.
If you get the money now, but the expectations are vague, you have no roadmap for securing the next raise, and you risk being viewed as overpaid and underperforming.
Right, you have to clearly, mathematically define what a successful year in your new role looks like, which leads perfectly into the final step, step 3, spark their interest in your success. You want to subtly manipulate the dynamic so that you gain an unofficial mentor rather than just a boss.
Remember what we discussed earlier with the babysitter and the locksmith. Figure out what the other side is really buying. When you are interviewing for a job, you aren't just selling your labor or your resume. You're selling yourself as a highly effective tool that the manager can use to validate their own intelligence, make their life easier, and look incredibly good to their own superiors.
And the text provides a literal psychological magic phrase to achieve this dynamic. It is a specific question you should ask at the end of an interview or during a performance review. What does it take to be successful here?
Now, university career centers always tell students to ask standard variations of this, like, what are the key deliverables, or what are the core competencies of the role? But the text insists that this exact phrasing is critical. What does it take to be successful here?
Why is that specific, slightly informal phrasing so much more powerful than asking about deliverables?
Because it subtly triggers a deep-seated human mentoring instinct. Students who use this exact phrase consistently report that interviewers physically change their posture. They lean forward. They often say, "Wow, no one has ever asked me that before." And then they stop giving corporate talking points and give a detailed, passionate, personal answer about their own philosophy of success.
Oh, that's clever.
And here is the psychological hook. If someone gives you highly personal, philosophical guidance on how to succeed, they will instinctively watch you closely to see if you actually follow their advice. They now have a personal, emotional stake in seeing you succeed because your success validates their worldview and their advice. You have just successfully recruited your boss to act as your unofficial mentor and champion.
That is a brilliant piece of psychological engineering. Okay, to show how all of these disparate tools anchors, ranges, non-monetary pivots, odd numbers, and mentorship come together in perfect harmony, the text walks us step by step through the story of a former MBA student named Angel Prado.
We have to deconstruct this entire interaction because it is flawlessly executed.
So, Angel is finishing up his MBA, which his current company is generously paying for. During his last semester, several months before graduation, he goes into his boss's office to casually lay the groundwork for his post-graduation compensation. Crucially, he doesn't make a hard, formal demand. He sets a non-specific emotional anchor.
He casually suggests in conversation that once he graduates, the roughly $31,000 a year the company is currently spending on his MBA tuition should logically just be redirected to him as an increase in his base salary.
He planted the seed perfectly. The boss made absolutely no commitment at the time, but the extreme anchor of $31,000 was successfully dropped into the boss's subconscious, setting the benchmark for future discussions. Fast forward to graduation. It is time for the big, official sit-down review. Angel goes in, completely calm and assertive, but he doesn't start the meeting by talking about money. He uses tactic 4. He pivots to non-financial issues first. Before salary is even mentioned, he asks for a new, elevated job title to reflect his new degree.
A brilliant, low-friction move. The boss readily agrees because granting a title change after an employee gets an MBA is a corporate no-brainer. It costs the company nothing, and more importantly, it establishes a positive, agreeable pattern of yes early in the meeting.
Then, Angel and the boss spend time meticulously defining his new roles and responsibilities, locking in those clear success metrics we talked about. And then the conversation naturally turns toward compensation. Angel just takes a breath, pauses, and goes completely uncomfortably silent. Tactic 2, he forces the boss to go first on the money.
And the boss, unable to handle the silence, breaks first. He offers a raise. And remarkably, entirely predictably due to the anchor and adjustment effect, the boss offers a raise of exactly $31,000. Angel's months-old, casually dropped anchor worked perfectly. For context, that is an almost 50% raise over his previous base.
Most people would literally pop champagne right there in the office. But Angel is a master negotiator. He doesn't say yes, but he also doesn't say no. He keeps talking, empathizing with the boss, acknowledging that he knows the company is currently going through some very tough, stressful investor negotiations. He is building that unconditional positive regard. He is validating the boss's stress.
And then he executes a fascinating, highly calculated physical maneuver.
Yes. Angel courteously asks for a brief moment to step out of the office to print up the newly agreed-upon job description so they can review it together.
This is pure, brilliant psychological manipulation of time and space. By physically leaving the room, he creates a sudden microdynamic of pre-deadline urgency. The boss is left sitting alone in his office, in silence, wondering what is happening, feeling the positive momentum of the meeting suddenly stall out.
So the boss starts sweating.
Nature abhors a vacuum, and the boss fills that vacuum with anxiety that Angel might be reconsidering.
Angel walks calmly back into the office with the freshly printed document, but on the bottom of the page, he has handwritten his desired compensation range. He's using Tactic 3, establish a range. But look closely at the highly specific numbers he uses. He writes $134.05K to $143K.
He brilliantly combined Tactic 3 with Tactic 5. He used a bolstering, odd-numbered range. $134.05K doesn't look like a greedy guess. It looks like a mathematically derived, unyielding floor based on precise, unarguable market value research. And because it's such a high extreme anchor, it exploits the boss's psychological tendency to adjust his own internal expectations upward.
The boss looks down at the paper. His eyebrows shoot up. He is clearly surprised by the sheer size of the number. But the reality-bending tactics have done their work. The boss looks up and counters with an offer of $120,000.
He jumped massive, unprecedented levels up from his own initial offer, purely because the odd-numbered range pulled him there.
Angel still doesn't say no. He doesn't argue. He just keeps talking, creating empathy, leaning on the positive relationship, and letting the uncomfortable silence do the work. And then the boss, entirely out of nowhere, throws out an even higher number, $127,000.
The boss is now literally negotiating with himself. Angel's just sitting there, pleasantly watching his boss bid against his own numbers.
Finally, the boss lets out a long sigh, looks at Angel, and says, "Okay, fine, I agree to the $134,500. He hit Angel's exact, incredibly high, odd-numbered floor.
And how does Angel flawlessly close the deal and ensure there is no lingering resentment?
He seals it by deploying the positive use of the F word. Angel looks his boss in the eye and sincerely says, "That's fair." And then he masterfully frames the entire newly agreed upon salary as a mentorship marriage. He says, "I want to be clear. I'm asking you, not the board of directors, for this promotion. I just need you to personally agree with it."
He made the boss the undisputed hero of the narrative.
hmm
He gave the boss the power. And the boss's immediate response proves the psychological tactic worked perfectly. The boss replied, "I'll fight to get you this salary." Angel didn't just extract the money, he successfully recruited a powerful internal champion.
It is an absolute start-to-finish masterclass in applied psychology. But, reading through all of these tactics today, the extreme low-ball anchors, the strategic, uncomfortable pauses, dropping F-bombs, the manufactured deadlines, the calculated use of odd numbers to project false precision, it is incredibly easy to look at this toolkit and feel a little, I don't know, dirty.
That is a very common, very understandable reaction. Many highly ethical people initially shy away from learning these techniques because they feel inherently manipulative. Even the phrase "bend their reality" inherently sounds a bit like dark magic or mind control or cheating the system.
Right. It feels like you are tricking the other person into doing something against their will.
But the text offers a powerful, necessary counter-perspective to that hesitation. These tools are utilized by the absolute best negotiators in the world, not because they are dark manipulative magic, but because they simply humbly recognize the human psyche exactly as it actually exists, rather than how we wish it existed.
We have to stop pretending we are perfectly rational, logic-driven computers making purely economic choices.
We are emotional, irrational, highly sensitive beasts.
We are, at our core, just monkeys throwing cucumbers at researchers because we didn't get a grape.
Exactly. But the beautiful thing is, we are emotional and irrational in highly predictable, mathematically consistent, pattern-filled ways. We consistently react to the pressure of deadlines. We consistently respect odd numbers. We consistently explode at perceived unfairness. And we are universally terrified by the prospect of loss.
Utilizing that specific knowledge to actively bridge the gap between sleeping in the same bed and dreaming different dreams isn't manipulation.
It is, ironically, the single most rational, empathetic thing you can do. It is acknowledging their reality.
It's about refusing to be fooled by the polite, superficial surface of the interaction. It's about having the courage to dive into that subterranean network of unspoken desires, hidden anxieties, and irrational fears.
If we connect all of this back to the grander, bigger picture we started with, the ultimate lesson is that every single negotiation you will ever face, from a terrifying hostage crisis in a war zone to a standard annual salary review in a quiet corporate office, it's fundamentally a psychological exercise, not a mathematical one.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today. We have covered a massive amount of ground. We have gone from realizing that the sacred, universally revered idea of compromise is often just a cowardly trap, to learning how to leverage the illusion of time, to deeply respecting the overwhelming, logic-destroying emotional power of fairness and loss aversion.
You now possess the reality-bending toolkit. You understand the mechanics of the black box.
But before we go, before you head out into your day and start applying these tactics, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought. Something for you to really mull over on your own time. Throughout this entire deep dive today, we have focused our analysis entirely outward.
We've talked extensively about how to audit a counterpart's fears, how to leverage their arbitrary deadlines, how to strategically bend their reality.
It has been a highly outward-facing offensive strategy, but I want you to take all of these principles and turn that analytical lens completely inward. Think about your own quiet internal monologue. Think about the major decisions you have made over the last week or the last year or the last decade.
How many bad, suboptimal deals have you quietly accepted? How many poor, mismatched shoe compromises have you settled for in your career or your relationships simply because you were terrified of the awkwardness of conflict?
How many massive life choices have you rushed into blindly?
Simply because of your own ticking clocks.
Exactly. How much of your daily life, your stress, your anxiety, is driven by an invisible, ongoing negotiation you are constantly having against yourself? Are your decisions being driven by your own self-inflicted, completely arbitrary deadlines? Are you currently paralyzed in your career by hidden loss aversions that you haven't even had the courage to identify yet?
Because here's these profound, inescapable truth.
Before you can ever hope to successfully step into a room and bend someone else's reality, you might need to take a very long, very hard look in the mirror and audit your own. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.